SFBBO, promoting sustainability by engaging communities for more than 40 years. Our Birdie Hour speaker series is a free virtual program. On May 16, 2024, Dr. Sahas Barve led a lively interactive Q&A about ornithology for our community.
Again, my name is Sahas Barve, and I'm a program director of Avian Ecology at Archbold Biological Station. And at Archbold, I oversee and run a long-term study of Florida scrub jays. So Florida scrub jays are this really cool social bird that lives in a very unique habitat. And so we run a long-term study, which is now in its 56th year of continuous monitoring. So it was started in 1969, and it's one of the longest continuous studies of any bird in the world. So let me tell you a little more about scrub jays and the work we do. So Archbold Biological Station is located on what is called the Lake Wales Ridge, this ancient sand dune system in the uplands of high elevation habitats of Florida. For Florida, that means that we are about 200 feet above sea level, which is considered high elevation in Florida. In Archbold, as a NGO, we do lots of research on a bunch of different things. So I'm the avian ecology director, but there's people studying herbs, people studying plants, and the overall goal of our organization is to further science and use science-based metrics to inform conservation at the level of Florida and beyond. And we sort of have 4 pillars that we sort of work under. And so some of them are saving the rarest of the rare. So for example, at Archbold Biological Station alone, which is a 20,000 acre preserve, we have 28 federally listed species. So out of which only 3 are birds, and the rest are plants and lichen and lizards and frogs and insects. And so we study the rarest of the rare. We also work a lot with agroecology systems. So we do a lot of native prairie savanna restoration. We are greatly involved in one of the biggest, most ambitious conservation programs currently in North America, the Florida Wildlife Corridor Project, which tries to connect the Everglades to the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia. And then we do all of this while we are also studying more landscape level issues like addressing climate change. And so the research I do on birds, and especially on scrub jays, falls within these pillars. So let me tell you a little bit about Florida scrub jays. Florida scrub jays are the only bird that is completely endemic to Florida. They're not found anywhere else on Earth outside Florida. And even within Florida, Florida scrub jays are restricted to these quote-unquote high elevation habitats of Florida. And they are threatened because this beautiful oak scrub habitat that is the Florida scrub jay's home is also a great place to put a citrus farm, to build your house, to put your golf course, which has resulted in 90% of Florida scrub jays already going extinct. So huge populations have already gone extinct, and we are down to the last 10%, which means that the Florida scrub jay is a federally listed species, and it is considered a threatened species according to the Endangered Species Act. But Florida scrub jays are a fantastic umbrella species for a host of other scrub endemic animals and plants. So if you were to save and preserve enough habitat for a few dozen families of Florida scrub jays, you inadvertently also preserve habitat for a host of endemic plants, lizards like these blue-tailed skinks and sand skinks, a bunch of endangered and threatened endemic insects, and also mammals. The cool thing about Florida scrub jays is that they are one of the few animals, or one of the first few animals that were shown to be dependent on fire. So as I'm sure you guys know in California, that there's a lot of fire suppression in habitats that historically burned at a pretty regular interval. Florida scrub jays also live in what is called a pyrogenic habitat. So this you may not know. So Florida is the world lightning capital. And so Florida has the highest rates of lightning strikes of anywhere in the world, which historically started a lot of wildfires. And this means that those wildfires burn through habitat, creating new types of habitat and a mosaic of time since fire in the landscape. So, and Florida scrub jays love habitats that are between 5 and 15 years post-fire. So that adds another sort of, I think it's really cool, another sort of wrinkle of complexity is if you want to save Florida scrub jays, you not only need to preserve habitat and preserve land, but you also need to burn it every few years. But the cool thing is that burning is actually really good. So at Archbold, we do a lot of prescribed burns to keep the landscape at Archbold as much in that 5 to 15-year-old post-fire window so that we have a big thriving population of Florida scrub jays. Just like acorn woodpeckers, who are your neighbors, or many of you may have seen acorn woodpeckers in and around the Bay Area, Florida scrub jays are also dependent on acorns because they live in oak scrub. And so unlike acorn woodpeckers that store all their acorns in one granary, Florida scrub jays do what is called scatter hoarding. So what they do is they individually store between 6,000 and 8,000 acorns every year. Each individual stores up to 8,000 acorns and then remembers the location of each of those acorns and then keeps retrieving them throughout the winter and well into spring. The cool thing is that, of course, the acorns that the scrub jays don't need end up sprouting and starting new oak plants. So the long-term study of Florida scrub jays at Archbold Biological Station is run by not only me, but a large crew of dedicated biologists that work really hard. And we do a complete demographic study, which means that every year for about 80 groups of Florida scrub jays, we find each of their nest, and then we uniquely mark the nestlings and the adults, and then follow their life throughout, which means that we put together some amazing data sets. So here's the Florida scrub jay pedigree from Archbold. So we have uniquely banded over 9,000 individual scrub jays, and we have a 14-generation deep pedigree. So we not only know all the individuals that are living in the population today, but we can tell who their parents were, who their grandparents were, who their great-grandparents were, so on and so forth for 14 generations. We also map Florida scrub jay territories every year so that we know if our habitat management actions are actually helping them produce more Florida scrub jays and expand their population in the form of new Florida scrub jay groups. So that is just a quick primer into what I do for my day job. But I'm here to answer all your questions about Florida scrub jays or about anything that you can think of about birds, and I'll try my level best to answer them here. So I think Kristen has some questions that she has already asked you guys to, several of you may have contributed, but I want to keep it interactive. So if you have a burning follow-up question, please go ahead and put it in the chat.
Marianne, did you want to ask your question or shall I ask it for you?
You can ask it.
Okay. So Marianne's question is, how are Florida scrub jays related to California scrub jays?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much, Marianne. So they all belong to the same genus, which is Aphelocoma. And actually, so they were actually California scrub jays, Mexican scrub jays, Woodhouse scrub jays, and Florida scrub jays. And the island scrub jay, which is only found on Santa Cruz Island in the Channel Islands, they all used to be one species for the longest time until we did some, I mean, not we, scientists did genetic analyses on the species and then split them based on how different they were genetically. The fact that there are scrub jays in Florida is a great testament to the fact that there was once a really dry period back in history, about 1 million years ago, when there was dry habitat that stretched all across the southern United States. So from all the way from Texas into Florida. So right now, outside Florida, the first scrub jay that you hit is you have to keep going west into western Texas. But those sort of relics of dry habitats past are everywhere in Florida. So we have gopher tortoises, just like California has desert tortoises. We have Aphelocoma jays, so scrub jays and California jays. We have armadillos. They all are basically remnants of a much drier time in Florida.
Wonderful. Thank you for that explanation. And so I don't see any other questions in the chat right now. So I'm going to go to my spreadsheet that has everybody's questions you sent in when you registered. So thank you for doing that. And I'm just going to go down the order that I have them here. So the next question is, do birds go to a nest at night or perch where they can?
That's a great question. So yes and no. So if the birds are nesting, they will go to their nest. So often it totally depends again on the group of birds. So for example, woodpeckers and cuckoos, the cuckoos that make their nest, the males roost on the nest. But in a lot of songbirds like scrub jays, the female roosts on the nest when they have eggs and chicks. So they roost with the chicks to keep them warm. But outside the breeding season, birds don't live in a nest. So they hang out on perches. In fact, so there's a few things that happen. So birds either nest on roost or sleep on perches. They might roost in a cavity. So for example, chickadees, titmice, nuthatches, a lot of woodpeckers all roost inside cavities. In fact, the acorn woodpecker, again, a very common Californian bird, is the only communally roosting woodpecker in North America. So I used to study acorn woodpeckers at this place called Hastings Natural History Reservation in Carmel Valley, California. And you can find 8 or 10 birds roosting in the same cavity at night. So again, depends on the species, but birds typically don't build a nest just to sleep in it. Birds don't even actually have to be sitting to sleep. A lot of birds can sleep while they're flying as well. So swifts are a great example where they might never land for weeks or months at a time. And in the evenings, so they're hawking insects all day. In the evenings, they form these big flocks and they go really high up in the air and then sleep while parachuting slowly down, and then do that over and over and over again through the night. So they do what is called hemispherical sleep, where only half the brain sleeps at a time. And hemispherical sleep has evolved multiple times across birds. So albatrosses do it, frigate birds do it, swifts do it. It has evolved in other animals as well. Dolphins are known to do it as well. So any animal that may, get into real danger. So for example, a dolphin may drown if it doesn't keep sleeping, or albatross that have to really fly big distances without stopping have evolved this hemispherical sleep so they can make their brains more efficient.
Who thought sleep would be so fascinating? That's really cool. We do have sort of a follow-up question in the chat. What is the average sleep per day for birds?
Yeah, that is a great question. So in fact, we don't know, as scientists, we don't know what most birds do for half their life, which is half the day. We have very, very little knowledge of sort of what habitats birds choose to sleep, especially the ones that don't sleep in a cavity. We don't have a good, if you asked anyone, what's a good habitat for oak titmice to roost in? the answer is we don't know. And there is some really cool thermal imaging technology that is being used increasingly to understand how birds sleep and where they sleep and what habitats they are choosing to sleep, whether they sleep all huddled up as a group or whether they sleep all separate. We know that some birds tuck their head into their wings. We know others don't. And so there's lots of fun questions about bird sleep that we actually don't know. What we can say is birds will basically become dormant at when it go. If it's a diurnal bird, it'll become sort of inactive at sundown when it becomes really dark. Typically 20-30 minutes after sunset, it becomes dark enough that birds will sleep, and then they wake up at the first light of dawn. There's another cool research that shows that the bigger the eye of the bird is, this is especially for land birds. So if you think about a robin's eye compared to a chickadee's eye, a chickadee's eye is significantly smaller compared controlling for body size to a robin's eye. So robin's eyes are really big, right? Owl eyes are really big. So bird eyes are really well correlated with their foraging sort of ecology. So robins, all turdus thrushes around the world, are early risers. They get up, they start singing, they start foraging really early.
Very cool. Thank you for that. Thank you for the question as well. So I have a question here, but I'm going to ask a follow-up question about the question because I want to make sure what we're referring back to is the question is, what is the population number left, and are they threatened or endangered, and do they migrate? Is that about the Florida jays?
Florida scrap jays.
Yeah, I think that is. So
yeah, so about the estimate, so a lot of Florida scrub jays are sort of spread out across the state of Florida. About half of them live in one place called Ocala National Forest, which is north of Orlando. That has about, to the best of our knowledge, that has about 1,900 family groups, which means about 5,000 birds. And so the upper limit of our estimate is about 10,000 individual Florida scrub jays, but the true population might be as low as 7,000 birds also.
And do they migrate?
They do not migrate. So they are almost to a fault philopatric, or they which means that once they settle on a piece of territory, they never leave it, ever. So we've had scrub jays at Archbold that have been on the same territory for 16 years.
Wow. So I'm sure that's positive and negative consequences for that. Thanks for those questions. So the next question I'm going to pull from our pre-questions. How do hormones change the ruddy duck bill to blue in breeding season?
Yeah, so the short answer is that there are these pigment-loaded cells, and those cells just produce blue pigment. And so the skin cells in the bird's beak produce the blue pigment that makes the duck beak look blue. We know that birds change color all the time, right? So you know that shorebirds right now look very different from shorebirds in fall. You know, I'm sure if you're a bird watcher, you know that fall warblers look very drab, and the non-breeding plumage is much less attractive to us and probably to them than the spring plumage. And so there is a lot of really genetic control over when a bird produces a certain color in its body. The types of colors vary. So birds also have what is called melanin. So if you see a bird with a black beak, the black in the beak is the same melanin that you have in your skin, and are very similar in structure. Birds also have what is called carotenoid colors. So a lot of birds have bright yellow beaks or bright orange beaks, or some birds have red beaks, they have red feathers, and those colors come from what is called carotenoid pigment. And carotenoids are food derived, which means that the animal has to eat a plant or a bug or something that has that pigment, and then it sequesters that color in its body. I'm from the East Coast, where there's a lot of northern cardinals, and I'm sure if you haven't seen one, you should come to the East Coast. It's a really striking bird. But northern cardinals are bright red in color, and because they eat red things and then sequester that red color. So if you starve a male cardinal of anything that has carotenoid pigments, then they will just produce regular brown plumage, just like the female cardinal, which is completely brown. And that again is really interesting, right? Because males and females cardinals have identical DNA. All cardinals have pretty much the same DNA, but how that DNA is expressed is completely different. Going back to ruddy ducks, in ruddy ducks, the males get these bright blue beaks, but the females don't, because they don't need to attract mates just like the males do. So it's a lot of cells producing certain pigments, but also the genes driving what the cells are producing.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I think we'll all be thinking about that next time we go out and look at the different colors that we see with the birds. Yeah. Another question that someone sent in ahead of time was, how do young first-year birds know whether their parents are just flying across the valley or actually leaving for migration?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and that's something that people have been thinking about for a long time. So birds use a variety of cues, both environmental and social, to decide when to start migrating. So we know that birds, for example, we think it is driven by photoperiod, which is the length of the day. So we know that at least a lot of migrating warblers get what is called migratory restlessness. So they will start just flying more and more. So this is done, we know this because of some really painful sounding experiments where they kept warblers in cages and gave them food, and then at some point their brains took over and they just wanted to migrate, and they kept hitting the cage until some birds actually died. So it's called Zugenruhe, or it's a German term, or migratory restlessness. So there's hormonal control over when to start migrating. There is also genetic control. So we know again that certain populations of birds will cross or migrate in a certain direction. So there's a bird called a European black cap. It's a type of warbler, but old world warbler. And there are two or three different populations of black caps. One population goes from Europe along the west coast of Africa. So these birds don't want to fly over the Sahara Desert because it's such a hot and hostile place. So one population has evolved to go around the west coast. Another population has evolved to go around the east coast of Africa. So basically avoid the Sahara Desert. But if you cross those two populations, so if you produce hybrids of those two populations, those birds go through the center of Sahara and die. And so there's a genetic control over what direction the bird takes when it starts migrating. Similarly, blackcaps are actually famous for migrating north in the winter, because a few blackcaps in the past realized that Brits love feeding birds, and they have huge bird feeders out in their gardens. And so a population of blackcaps actually started wintering north of where they summer, because there's abundant food resources, and England is also significantly warmer than a lot of other parts of Europe. So they, but the offspring of those north migrating warblers started migrating north. And so there's hormonal control, there's genetic control, but there's also social cues. So a lot of these birds will start making special calls. They will start doing a lot of sort of practice flights around. When they actually decide, or if there is like a tonight's the night call, I'm not sure, but we know that there is a lot of flight calls in birds, right? So we know when they're flying overhead, we hear each species makes a very unique migration call. And so they might just be listening to that. You can train birds to fly in a certain way. So I'm sure you guys have seen those videos of people training geese and cranes of where to fly to. So migration is a really wonderful, cool behavior that we didn't understand a lot for a long time. So I just wanted to give you a quick, really cool story of migration. Is one of the first instances of people realizing that birds are moving really big distances came when, so for the longest time, people thought that common birds like swallows that are everywhere in your yard and in your neighborhood in the summer, they're gone in the winter. People used to think that all the swallows went and slept underwater. So that was the sort of thought that a lot of people had. A lot of European villages also have nesting white storks, just like we have wood storks in Florida. They have white storks, and white storks nest in villages. So they'll often form nests on people's roofs and chimneys. So there was a white stork that came to Germany, and someone noticed something sticking out of its neck. And so they were like, oh my God, this stork is hurt. Let me find out if we can catch it. So they caught the stork, and then they extracted this thing that had gone straight through the neck and come out on the other side. The stork was still alive and well. And they couldn't identify it. And then they showed it to an anthropologist, and it turns out that was actually a spear point from a tribe in Africa. So that was one of the first very obvious evidences that these storks who are breeding in Germany are flying all the way to Africa and back every time. And so when it was in its wintering range, someone tried to hunt it, and it survived the hunt and made it all the way back to Germany and was breeding.
It's kind of the earliest version of bird banding in kind of a strange way, but it's a fascinating story. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks for that question. So the next question we have here is, someone was wondering if you knew anything about the preferences of mergansers. In the bay, hooded mergansers and commons seem to really like stormwater retention basins. From what they can tell based on their own experience and that of other birders, it's hard to find them in other water bodies. So anything you want to say about that?
Yeah. So mergansers are, they're cool fish-eating ducks. So mergansers eat largely fish and or crayfish or crustaceans in the water, and these retention ponds are probably full of fish, probably full of really small minnows, because they're so nutrient rich, right? So there's a lot of nutrients that are getting washed into these retention ponds, and which drives the growth of algae, which probably drives the growth of crustaceans, or little shrimps, or crayfish, or fish. And mergansers love all of that. They're also diving birds. I'm sure you've seen mergansers dive underwater, and so they need water that is relatively deep. So that's probably one of the reasons, because there's concentrated food resources and the water is there all year round. So it's a constant, very dependable source of food in that area. In other places, there are more natural water bodies. The amount of resources in the water bodies naturally fluctuates across the year. So there's sometimes when there's a lot of plant growth, a lot of prey available, but then at other points of the year, the water level might go down, or the amount of oxygen in the water might go down, and it changes the prey availability, which probably changes why the amount that is used by these birds. So you may realize that once those ponds start getting really, really small, that's when you get a lot of wading birds going into it. Herons love it. Right now we have close to my house, we have a pond that is drying up really quickly, and we had 63 wood storks. I never see storks there, but now that it is shallow enough and it has trapped all these fish in it, all these wood storks and American white pelicans are descending on that lake and emptying the fish out. So it totally depends. To answer your question, totally depends on how much nutrients are available in the water, which in this case might be very high. because of the type of water it is, which probably drives the availability of food, which probably attracts predators like mergansers to come and feed there.
Interesting. Well, one of our scientists did a study before coming here looking at the unintended positive consequence of leaks in our kind of water systems providing actual habitat for rails. And it's a nice thing to think about that sometimes we do these things as humans that do provide something for birds that we weren't even intending. So thank you for the question, and thank you for the explanation. The next question that I see in the ones that people sent us is the rate of extinction slowing or accelerating? If you had all the power in the world, what changes would you bring about to protect bird populations?
Wow, that's that's quite a question. So the rate of extinctions that's a hard question, because it's we often don't know what we are losing. There's a lot of biodiversity out there that is yet to be described, and so we might be losing species that we don't even know about. And so I definitely don't want to say that the rate of extinction is slowing down, but there is hope, right? So we know a lot about how to save animals, much more than we knew in the past. So we know that animals need good habitat, they need large undisturbed habitats, and contiguous ecosystems. So by doing that, we are able to preserve and conserve a lot of animals instead of just one species. So there's some really big corridor networks out there that are connecting large landscapes, which conserve an entire salmon run, or the migration path of caribou in Alaska, or like the Florida Wildlife Corridor, where a black bear can walk from the Everglades all the way to Georgia. So we not only know we know much better about how to manage habitats, how to conserve habitats, and how to protect species. Whether we are doing it well enough is obviously up to debate. We are probably, in my opinion, we are not doing enough. There has to be a lot of government buy-in and public buy-in. But at the same time, it's a really complex issue, because a lot of people need a lot of resources that people in developed countries have been enjoying for a long time. A good analogy I think about always is someone living in the first world, in a first developed country, consumes typically about 3 times as many resources per capita as someone living in a developing country. So does that mean that a great way of reducing our impact on our population is for these people in developed countries reducing their resource consumption? But the question is, are you ready to not have AC on really hot days, or give up on heating, or other really cool, like, energy intensive resources that you use? So it's the second part of your question is really, really hard to answer. But as a scientist, I can say that we know a lot more about how to conserve animals than we did a few decades ago.
And it's a question we grapple with here at SFBBO as well. We recently did our strategic plan, and we're looking to increase our engagement of communities and bring more people into the solutions. And I think that you're working on that as well. So It's a really great question, and it's one we should continue to ask ourselves. The next question is, there are so many crows in my neighborhood. What is the impact on songbirds and raptors they mob?
Probably nothing, because most songbirds in your neighborhood have co-evolved with crows. Crows actually do a lot of really good, quote unquote, services for us, right? They eat a lot of trash, they eat a lot of carrion that is on the road, and crows are just really you probably see them in large numbers because they form these really fun roosts, and these crow roosts, which are especially common in the winters, they form roosts because crows are immensely social birds. Just like we have friends, crows have individual social bonds with a lot of other crows in their society, and they form these roosts where they all meet, they all chat. They crow roosts are known to be information centers where they might see at what time other crows are coming in, what direction they're coming in from, what body condition they're in. And then the next day, if you were really hungry and you see a well-fed crow coming from the south, you're going to be like, I'm going to follow that crow tomorrow morning to see where he or she is going. And so they follow each other to really good foraging spots. Crows also love play, and so I'm sure I don't know if you've seen it, but you should observe crows and ravens more. They play with each other. They play in the snow. They play with little objects. I'm sure you might have seen videos of them playing with dogs and cats and picking at their tails and stuff like that. They're just really curious creatures, very social, just like us. They have a tremendous repertoire of sounds that they use. They have a sound for predators, they have a sound for food, they have a sound for they have happy sounds, sad sounds, angry sounds, just like us. And so they make they are behaviorally complex and absolutely native to North America. So although they definitely do predate on songbirds and other birds in their habitats, they're definitely not driving extinctions of anything.
Thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you ever saw, there was a New York Times article about a group of crows here in Sunnyvale that just decided to hang out during the pandemic in an outdoor restaurant area, and they now have tour guides that have a stop there to look at the crows. So
really?
Yeah.
So they do. I mean, crows do all sorts of really fun things, right? Like there's someone trying to teach crows to pick up trash, and they get a little kibble of dog food every time they deposit a plastic bottle in the trash can. You can train them just as well as you can train any other animal. Crows are pretty special.
Smart birds. Thank you for that question. Thanks for the information. Next question I see here is, we see the mergansers and mallards in their colorful plumage, but when the baby ducklings are born, we don't see the colorful male ducks. Do they go somewhere else when the babies are born, or do they help raise the young but don't have the colorful plumage? If they change colors, what happens to the colorful feathers?
Yeah, all great questions. So there aren't a lot of ducks and mergansers that have breeding and non-breeding plumage. I can't think of a single species, although I might be wrong. Maybe spot-billed ducks, African and Asian spot-billed ducks do get more bright beaks. But to answer your point, ducks and all species of birds that belong to what are called galliforms or pheasants, so chickens and turkeys and pheasants, they have extremely precocial chicks. So precocial means that they are born almost very in an advanced stage. Or to contrast that, a chickadee chick is born completely naked and completely blind. And so that chickadee chick can't control its own body temperature, can't even see, and is born completely helpless. And those birds like that are known to have altricial chicks or altricial nestlings. The opposite of altricial is precocial, and precocial is we use it for humans as well. Precocial nestlings, so ducks and ducks and geese and mergansers and chickens and turkeys have precocial nestlings, which means that they are fully formed. They have feathers. They have their eyes open. They can start foraging right away as soon as they come out of their eggs. And so they need significantly less parental care than a lot of other birds or a lot of songbirds like chickadees and titmice and robins and thrushes. The flip side of that is that because they need very little parental care, only mom can suffice. So the and the mom is often drab colored, and so she attracts fewer predators. And the chicks themselves, the nestlings themselves, are really well camouflaged. So, I mean, if you might have seen a wood duck mom with like 20 babies following her. But otherwise, most of the time, the wood duck babies are well hidden, and they can swim by themselves. They can start feeding by themselves, and so there's very little actual feeding of the young like many other birds do. For example, coots, there's a lot of feeding of young in coots. But ducks start foraging pretty much on their own right away, which means that the males can retain their bright plumage, and they just hang out on their own. They in the non-breeding season, they just hang out on their own, or they may form flocks, mixed flocks of males and females. The other cool thing about ducks is that and duck feathers is that a lot of ducks do what is called a sudden molt, or an explosive molt, which means that they are flightless. So a lot of ducks and geese are flightless for several weeks of the year because they lose all their flight feathers together. So they all hang out in reeds and ponds and lake in dense vegetation while they're growing out their flight feathers. And then once they do, they start flying again. So while most birds do require some form of parental care, in many birds, a lot of parental care, right? So like I said, chickadees or cardinals are born completely naked and are about 10 times their birth weight in about 10 days. So they need a lot of food also. So those babies are growing exponentially. So imagine you have a baby that's 7 pounds when it's born, and it's 70 pounds on day 10. Like, imagine how fast that baby is growing, right? So birds are growing that fast. So some birds need a lot of parental care, but there are other birds that are almost completely altricial. So there's a family of birds called megapodes. Megapode literally means big feet. And megapodes live in tropical Asia and all the way into Australia. So in Australia, in Eastern Australia, in suburbs, you have a common bird called a brush turkey, which is a megapode. And megapodes build these huge mounds of either sand or rotting vegetation. The females come and lay an egg in the sand and just walk away. They never have, and the chicks hatch out and then walk away themselves. So they have zero parental care. The chicks are born almost completely fully formed. They're obviously not as big as the adults, but they don't need any parental care. They never meet another adult or go to them for food. They just hatch out of the egg, come out of the mound of rotting vegetation or sand, and just walk away.
It's all a diversity in how chicks are brought into the world, and it's kind of some cool, very diverse examples there. Thanks for the question. And another question is, what flight patterns do swallows use to catch insects?
Yeah, so they probably use the anti-flight pattern of the insects that they're catching. But the cool thing in swallows and in nightjars and in a lot of flycatchers like sage phoebes or black phoebes that you have in your backyard, they have these really sensitive feathers. So just like I have whiskers that are made of hair, a lot of flycatchers and nightjars have whiskers. They're called rictal feathers, but they're feathers. They're hair-like feathers that grow around the mouth, and they are really sensitive. So they fly around. A lot of nightjars will fly around with their mouth open, and as soon as an insect touches the rictal feather, they snap shut and catch the insect. So they do a lot of really energetic, fast flights, and they are just like living in a really fast-paced life all their life, trying to catch insects on the wing. Swifts do that as well. Swifts have really, I'm sure you've seen swifts really flying really fast as well.
It was a good question, and I think that'll be changing how we observe the birds now when we see them. Another question is, what patterns do you see in spread of avian flu?
Yeah, so There is some avian flu is a native endemic virus to large parts of the globe, and every year there are outbreaks. We are, of course, scared of avian flu ever since we had that first spillover of avian flu into humans. But avian flu has been going through birds for a long time. This year's outbreak wasn't very bad. There were some big die-offs in Northeast North America. And you guys on the West Coast might have seen some die-offs as well, but it wasn't as bad as it was originally thought to have been. So there were lots of weather conditions where epidemiologists were scared of a lot of avian flu spreading from one population to the other or across North America, but it didn't happen. That doesn't mean that it won't happen in the future. So the state and federal government worked really closely with people who have birds in like the chicken industry and the turkey industry, but they also work closely with biologists. So for example, last year, when there was a small outbreak in Florida, I was notified because we handle wild birds all the time. I was notified because I'm the permit holder, and we were told what to do, how to handle birds, how to not to handle birds. We were given specific guidelines about how to sanitize our equipment after every bird that we handle, and also to keep them informed about seeing any dead birds also. So there is a lot of really good, robust surveillance that happens at the state level and by federal agencies as well. And so, of course, you as a citizen, you should never, a civilian should never handle birds without the right training and without the right permits. And if you have a dead or dying bird, you should definitely approach it with caution or ask a person that is qualified to handle birds to come and rescue it or treat it.
Thank you for that question. And for those people who are interested in general health of bird species, SFBBO does have our avian disease prevention program, which starts next month. It goes through November. Different kinds of diseases there. But thank you for that question. We want to make sure that we do what we can to protect birds from the spread of these kinds of things. I've got a kind of two-part question here. One person said, my sister lives in New South Wales, Australia, is planning to hang a bird feeder and plant a few butterfly-friendly bushes in her backyard. Will the butterflies become bird food? What is the best food to attract fairy wren? And then the second part of that question, I can read the first part again, but the other question is, the person who wrote the question said that they live in El Granada, California, just south of San Francisco. On the coast, they have a small bird feeder in their backyard. It attracts lots of small birds. 6 months ago, they put up a small rectangular bird house with 3 small holes, and they haven't seen any birds come near the house. What type of bird houses do small birds like? So bird feeders, bird-friendly plants, do butterflies get eaten, and bird houses?
Yeah, all great questions. The first is, yes, birds eat butterflies, but that's just natural. It's butterflies have a lot of ways of escaping birds, and birds never impact butterfly populations to an extent that butterflies get locally wiped out. So you don't have to worry about it. You're doing a fantastic thing by supporting local biodiversity, native biodiversity. So plant native plants and support native biodiversity for sure. Food is good for birds. Totally depends on the birds that you're trying to attract. A lot of finches love seeds. Orioles love fruits. Hummingbirds, of course, like nectar. And so again, you can go to a pet store and they probably have the birds that will like that food probably drawn on the bag of birdseed. But there's obviously also a lot of literature out there on the internet that will tell you what kind of food to buy. So for example, I know many of you probably know this, But woodpeckers love suet cakes because they love suet, which is just almost pure fat. Birds like suet more in the winter when they are using a lot of energy for keeping warm. How to attract fairy wrens is a great question. I'm not Australian. I've never been to Australia, but I do know that fairy wrens are an insectivorous bird, which means that if you really wanted to attract them, I would probably put out mealworms. But I don't know how to keep other birds from eating those mealworms, because mealworms are really, really tasty for a lot of birds. But fairy wrens are really cool birds. So if you have them in the backyard, I'm definitely very, very jealous of you. Let's talk about bird houses. A lot of birds live in cavities. So they live in holes in trees and in dead parts of trees. And those are the birds that you're going to get in those bird houses, right? So a robin that makes an open cup nest on a platform with sticks is never going to, typically won't nest inside a birdhouse. So you're going to get chickadees, you might get nuthatches, you can get owls, you can get bluebirds roosting and nesting in birdhouses. And bird houses are just notoriously hard. So there are two things. One is to answer your question about how long it will take for a bird to start living in it. The first is the entrance, the size of the entrance of the birdhouse. So if the entrance of the birdhouse is too small for a chickadee to go in, then it's probably going to limit all other birds going in also. So you need to make sure that the hole is big enough. But if the hole is too big, then it's a bad thing as well. So a lot of woodpeckers, for example, if you've seen woodpeckers making a cavity, they make a cavity that's just big enough for them to go in. Because if you make the cavity bigger, the entrance of the cavity bigger, then a predator can go in or a competing species can go in. So there's a lot of animals that compete for cavities because in North America, only nuthatches and woodpeckers can make their own cavities. All other cavity nesting birds, including several warblers, all chickadees, titmice, all these birds, even owls, rely on someone else to make their cavities or nest in naturally formed cavities. So there's a lot of competition for cavities, which brings me to my second point, which is if your neighborhood has a lot of naturally occurring cavities, or if there are a lot of other people who already have a lot of boxes, then it's going to take a minute for someone to even need the cavity that you have. Which brings me to my third point, which is typically when you put out a birdhouse, it smells like paint. It's something new, and birds just don't know about it. So sometimes it takes 1 or 2 years for the birds to start even noticing it, trying to go check it out. You may see birds going in and out for a long time before they actually start nesting in it. And so again, I would, if your birdhouse has a little door to check what's inside, I would probably leave it alone, even if you see birds going in and out, until maybe if you see a bird come with food in its mouth and then go in and you can hear the chicks begging, there are obviously nestlings inside. And then I would be very, very, very careful and very short in quickly opening and seeing what's in it and closing it and walking away. Not only are the parents themselves freaking out because it's a huge animal looking at their nest, but a lot of predators are actually watching you. So this is where those crows come into the picture again. Crows are very smart, and if you keep going to the same birdhouse every day and opening the door, then they start watching you, and then they're like, oh, I can hear every time this person goes near that little wooden box, I hear nestlings calling. There's nestlings in there. Let me go eat some nestlings. And so in my research also, where I study open cup nesting Florida scrub jays, we constantly scan the landscape for grackles, for kites, for hawks, just to make sure that we are not attracting or not leading predators to the nest. So just be careful of who you show the nest to once they are nesting. be patient. Someone will use it eventually.
Those are great questions, and thank you for those really thorough answers. I want to just mention that I know that we're at the end of the hour. We have just a few more questions, and so if you have to go. Thank you for joining us. But if you want to hear the last few answers, I hope that's okay. We just have three, and I'll tell you what the three questions are, so people will know if they want to stay. One is what can we do to stop people from feeding feral cats? And then the other two are nice wrap-up questions. One is, what are the best birding locations and in what seasons in Florida? And then the last one is about what are the top handful of resources that you regularly read to keep up on the current state of ornithology?
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with cats. It's a human problem, right? It's not a cat problem. And so we need to educate humans about the sort of bad side effects of feeding feral cats, because these cats that are subsidized with human food still hunt a lot of wild animals, not just birds. A lot of mammals and a lot of reptiles also get killed by cats regularly. And so it is all about working with people, working with communities, and making them understand that cats are probably best kept indoors. I have 2 cats myself, and we love our cats, but we never let them out because we don't want them killing wildlife, but we also want to keep them safe. Like the chance of your cat dying if it's outside is significantly higher than if it's inside your house. So again, it's just talking to those people and trying to convince them to keep their cats indoors. There was a bird resource question. What was the question before that? Can you remind me?
Oh, so the question about great places to do birding in Florida.
Oh, birding in Florida. Okay, great. So we moved to Florida about a year and a half ago. So we are still exploring several parts ourselves, but totally depends on what kind of birds you see or want to see. So there's some really nice habitats in the center of Florida where we live, where we have Florida scrub jays, crested caracaras, Florida grasshopper sparrows, which are a very, very highly endangered subspecies of the more broadly distributed grasshopper sparrow, only found in Florida, only breeds in Florida, has a really cool song. And we have Bachman sparrows also, which are a really fun specialty of Florida. So Florida is probably best known for its water birds, and there are huge rookeries of wading birds and water birds along the coasts of Florida. So the Everglades, of course, is a great place to go birdwatch. Fort DeSoto National Wildlife Refuge, or Fort DeSoto State Park near Tampa, Florida, is a great place to go watch birds of all kinds. They are a really good place for migrating warblers in the migration season as well. There are some places that are really good for snail kites. So Payne's Prairie near Gainesville, Florida, is a great place to go see snail kites. Snail kites are a type of raptor, or a type of predatory bird that specializes on eating snails. So they have really cool hooked beaks that help them extract these apple snails from their shells. What else is Lake Okeechobee has some huge rookeries of, a third of Florida's white ibis breed on Lake Okeechobee, for example. So there is Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge is another great place. Florida is full of really fun birds, and the way to decide where to go is, I'll use the third question to tell you. So if I were to go to Florida, a resource I use always is eBird. And so eBird is a great community science driven platform, right? So it's bird watchers like you and I who are contributing data and helping other people find birds. So for example, if I wanted to see a snail kite and I was going to Florida, what I would do is go to the eBird and hit explore and look at the snail kite distribution map and look at where snail kites have been seen most regularly and when, and then go to those places. So I use eBird a lot. I eBird myself as much as I can, but I use eBird to sort of look at what other people are looking at, and then try to go see those birds. I don't use Merlin a lot around me where I stay, although I do still use Merlin to identify, but Merlin is a really great tool that is powered by AI to identify birds based on their calls and their photos. So you can take a photo of a bird and then use Merlin to identify it, or you can start recording and Merlin picks up all the calls, all the birds that are singing in your environment. So it listens to the bird calls and identifies the bird calls, and Merlin is really, really good at it now. Of course, nothing is absolutely fail safe, but like a lot of humans make mistakes as well. I definitely make mistakes when I'm in a new environment, or if I'm hearing a bird after a really long time. It may take me sometimes several minutes or even sometimes hours, and then I'll be eating dinner and I'm like, oh, it was a Bachman sparrow, and it just suddenly comes to me. So Merlin's a great way of identifying birds. And lastly, I don't have a particular resource for keeping up with ornithology. I just read a lot of popular science, read a lot of science news, and that's where I get a lot of my knowledge, or I keep up to date with current knowledge on birds. So keep reading newspapers and keep clicking on articles that sound fun to you.
Excellent. And I just had one quick follow-up question. I don't know if the organization you work for ever does community events. So if people are coming to Florida, can they stop by and see what you have?
Definitely. So we do community events. The Bird Lab, the Avian Ecology program at Archbold does 2 events every year. One is called the Avian Ecology Open House, where we talk about what we do and about our long-term study of Florida scrub jays. We sometimes take people out into the field and show them Florida scrub jays. We also do a Darwin Day event. So we have a small naturalistic collection. And so we bring out some really cool specimens from all over Florida and talk to people about museums and natural history collections as well. So there's stuff that we do online as well. So if you're interested in what Archbold does, you should definitely go to our website, and we post everything we are going to do there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who participated. You guys had some fantastic questions. It was a really diverse topics that we were able to cover. A really creative way to do a birdie hour. Sahas, thank you so much for offering your time and having this great idea. We really enjoyed meeting you, and thank you for joining our community. And thanks everyone for participating. Sahas, thank you so much for the wonderful Ask Ornithologist questions and for the work that you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. All right. See you guys. Good night.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.
SFBBO is a nonprofit. With your support, we will continue to inform decision makers, inspire people to act, and involve diverse communities in our work. Please visit our website to learn more and get involved today.